A lot of people.
Great for
Here we
our
go.
business, so appreciate that. That was beautiful.
Yes, yes.
All right, we're live. Go ahead, Juan.
Hey, super. Here in Seoul, South Korea, and it's my Sunday evening, your Sunday morning, um, and I think we're about 12 hours out of whack, maybe 11 hours out of whack or something, 13 hours out of whack. But boy, is there stuff going on over here. There goes my dinner. Um, uh, we went to Korean church service today at a church called The Cross. And they're part of a kind of a larger network here in Korea. And they even have a couple of them in the States, out in New Jersey. And I believe they have one out in the Los Angeles area. They actually have an event going on up at Pepperdine University called David's Tent, I think, in the next week or so. But great church. A number of Americans that live here go to this same church, and so they had an interpreter for us. And I had the former prime minister of South Korea, Mr. Hwang, very respected person within the nation of South Korea. He is also the legal counsel for the current president that was put in prison, and Mr. Jung, and so he sees him in prison and like that, and so very influential. It's interesting as we walk around town, we go to restaurants or businesses with our various meetings. Everybody in the country recognizes him instantly, and he's a rock star. And they want pictures with him, and their kids and all that. It's just endless. Very gracious about it, but he's right at the core of this fight going on in Korea. And I don't think that in the States people fully grasp what's going on here. It's so intricately tied to what's going on in the elections in the United States, and even what President Trump did a little over 3 weeks ago now in calling out China for interfering in our 2020 election. But it's much more extensive than that. There's an organization here called Association of World Election Bodies. So it's A-Web. And, I sometimes talk about this Tholian web of containment that is a Star Trek term, and where they were being imprisoned by another race out in space, and they were weaving a web around the starship and then going to pull it to some prison location. And Spock famously says at a certain point, he says, if they complete the web, we will not be able to escape it, and we will not have the technology to escape it. So they can't let them complete this web before they are able to escape. This Tholian web of containment. Well, A-Web, a world election body, has been integral in the Chinese plan to take over countries across the world in order to bring them under their control. And in fact, they have 111 countries that are members of A-Web. And they have 121 different governing bodies out through those countries. So some countries are so large or important where they have multiple control locations or affiliates within this A-Web organization. China has been using A-Web as a tool supposedly to assist in the elections all over the world, but in reality it's to control the elections all over the world. And the headquarters the world headquarters is right here in China or in South Korea. So this is the launching place. And they've been very successful. So, I've talked on your show with your audience and other audiences repeatedly about the fact that there's within the operation coming out of Venezuela and into Serbia that the technicians who are testifying before grand juries right now in America on their interference in the American elections, including 2020, they say that they directly interfered with and flipped elections in 71 countries plus the United States. Within the AWeb system, they have offices and operations in 111 countries, which, by the way, just an interesting aside, 111 is the number of war in the occult. It is used within a number of the secret handshake organizations as a code for war. And so 111 in various places shows up over and over and over as a kind of a call sign. So I thought it was very unique that they even wanted to claim precisely and handle elections in 111 countries. Within that, just to give the extreme, for example, here in South Korea, in some of the demonstrations that I attended over the last few days, repeatedly you will find where they show pictures from the Congo and AWeb stealing and trying to steal the elections in the Congo, and with China influence, and in neighboring countries in South Africa, or in Africa, I should say, including South Africa. And so the reason that's important is because the people here in South Korea are very amped up and disturbed because the Christian population in the Congo has been decimated by these attacks where, within the commonly used number, 10 million people have died in the Congo, where China's been influencing through neighboring countries and operations to go after their mineral wealth. The figure that you get if you're in neighboring countries like Uganda is it's more like 20 million. And by the way, in Uganda right now, you have 2 million plus refugees who had to leave the Congo, mostly under the age of 18, who are stuck there. They can't go home, even though Tikasheti is doing everything he can. Every time he's tried to come over and meet with Trump, they try to do another coup or assassinate him or a member of his family. And so a very precarious situation there. And they tie it all back to China with what's going on in Africa. Well, that's the same thing theme we have even in South America. I have people in the intelligence world that were doing a meeting. They had a couple of people that they needed to go talk to, and in a lot of parts of the world, that area of Guatemala, it's kind of hot at night. So people go out, in the daytime, they take a rest, a siesta in the afternoon because it's so hot. And then they'll go out and do stuff later in the evening. So it was after midnight, very common thing, nothing unusual about it. They went out and had a little bite of dinner. And on the way walking back to their hotel, wanted to have another beer because they're having an important conversation. There was a guy at the bottom of a building, and they have a little table, they screen you, and then you can go up and have a drink in their little bar up on the rooftop. So they just stopped, did their thing, gave him his little tip, and went upstairs, and very quickly realized they were in some type of a whorehouse type situation. And so as you looked around the room, you could see the Chinese guys in the corner that were controlling the room, and then some locals, and then there was girls there from literally all over the world, uh, uh, Russian, Korean, um, Cambodian, uh, and then local girls. And one of the girls came to my guy who was there, and they were like, "Oh shoot, what have we got ourselves into?" And was trying to extricate himself, and she wouldn't let go. She was Russian, and she was, being very courteous, but she was very, you got to help me type thing. But the help she was needing was to keep her handlers happy by getting a customer, and not to be, escape or something like that. That would be beyond the pale. So the next day in a briefing they were in, they were up front, told their hosts, who were very senior in the military there in Guatemala, what had happened, where they were at. And the room kind of laughed. Yeah, that's one of the three that the Chinese run here in our area, and for the Chinese workers and for the locals. And that started about a week after they got here and had been in place for quite some time. And, this is the kind of a fight that they were in. As our guys were looking at the people traveling to get to the United States through the border regions and like that, the part of the fight that nobody talks about is the Chinese involvement in so many of these countries, which is, more than just helping build a bridge or a dam or something like that. And same story in Uganda, where they helped finance a dam and then sent the workers in to build it and have them on the hook for 50 years on a loan for the dam that they built. So just to walk back from all of that, the organization, AWEB, focused on the world, but through South Korea. It's a hidden, not obvious Chinese operation to control elections across the world, and to get the machines used, various types, go by different names, still the same programs, the Smartmatic type programs, in elections all over the world. And so, from my perspective, the front line in this whole war isn't necessarily even China precisely, but it's this arm, this pivot point through South Korea that's being used as the hub. People can come from all over the world, do the relations. They don't, necessarily broadcast it. That this is a wholly owned, operated, funded, everything Chinese operation.
So AWeb, it's a larger scale operation that needs to be taken down at some point, right?
They need to be taken down very harshly, dramatically, totally exposed for what they're doing and the way that they're doing it through South Korea. But let me throw this in to the equation. They would get funding directly here in South Korea from USAID, significant funding. But that wasn't all of it, because if you looked at USAID and where their money was going out, you wouldn't see the broader operation. They weren't just funding it here in South Korea. They were funding AWEB in all those 121 locations, 111 countries. So you literally had USAID funding a Chinese operation to steal the vote in elections worldwide. Why do you think Trump cut their funding off? Oh, jeez.
That was brilliant.
You know, so you can't say that Trump and the team behind him aren't aware of this. They are. They're working a um, plan to cut off the resources, and it'd be like putting a siege on a city. Do you want to attack the city day one of the siege? No, you start cutting off their supplies, cutting off their water, their food, and let them, feel the pain a bit before you decide to go for the main attack. And so Trump has cut off these supplies that were keeping AWeb very healthy. Because in so many of these places around the world where they're operating, whoever's got the gold rules. So they've got money. It was coming from the U.S. that China's managing to go out and do all this mischief. And by the way, from another component, back in the 60s, excuse me, 70s, when we had the church committee hearings concerning the CIA's mischief all over the world and exposed the family jewels. During the testimony of the director of CIA, he was asked about USAID and their operations in Chile and with Allende and like that. And he testified that all of the USAID personnel and operation was a CIA operation in those areas that he was questioned about. Now, he didn't talk about other places directly, but by extrapolation, you say, well, all or at least most of the operations where USAID was present, the personnel were working for the CIA. Exactly his word, they work for us. In Indonesia, where President Obama's supposed birth mother, she wasn't, Stanley Ann Dunham worked. Think about this. Here she's a college student. She goes off, she has a baby, she heads off to Indonesia. Indonesia was like the technical equivalent of moving to Tehran in that period. We had all the stuff going on in Vietnam. It was a real hotbed of intrigue for the whole world. And she was working for USAID, doing essentially what amounted to historical studies of family lines and things like that, mapping the family lines. The problem is that the work that she was doing was the basis eventually for the extermination of millions of people in Indonesia and the flipping of a presidential race in Indonesia. The president of Indonesia at the time, Suharto, I believe I always get him reversed, came out publicly and told the world in 1967 that USAID, I take it back, 66, news conference 66, he said that Subud, a pseudo-religious organization of which Obama's mama was a member, by the way, only had like 3,000 members worldwide, less than 1,000 in Indonesia. But he called them out by name, said they are a front for the CIA who was trying to steal the presidential election in Indonesia. And in fact, they did. And then subsequent to that, depending on whose reports you're looking at, with assistance out of the Philippines from the U.S. military supplies that the CIA diverted to Indonesia, they had a mass slaughter, killed on the low side 1 million people, on the high side 5 million people, depending on who you're talking to, of which the identification of which families and groups and cities were to be wiped out was part of this USAID operation. So USAID is pretty tainted. And the people running USAID in collusion with CIA people, there's a very bad history. And then beyond that, here you have USAID funding this AWeb operation. And there's plenty of intrigues here where, especially in some of these other countries, including State Department people, etc., they've colluded with AWeb and in intelligence operations to steal elections around the world. 111 countries. And this is the kind of mischief that is the reason why CIA would not cooperate with the Executive Order 13848 concerning monitoring for any foreign interference in the U.S. elections from September of 2018, when Trump put that executive order in place, up through the present. When the Director of National Intelligence was Radcliffe, was supposed to be providing information on whether or not there was foreign interference in the U.S. election after the November 3rd, 2020 election, and he had 45 days to do so. The reason that he would not provide that information about foreign interference is because it would have had to have included AWeb and their work to influence the U.S. election through their operatives. And you pull on that string and it goes out to the whole world. And they did not want to be exposed. And the collusion and cooperation of other intelligence agencies within the U.S. Homeland Security system, they were very, very concerned and aware that you pull on that AWeb string, everything comes unraveled. So at this moment in time, as important as it is to go after the Venezuelan operation that moved to Serbia and their work, even that operation going further back in the chain is going to show AWeb. And this is where much of what's going to happen in America and the work to unravel these attacks on elections around the world is going to go. AWeb will become a name that everybody is extremely familiar with. And then bear with me a second, Michael. I know I'm kind of droning on, but I want to get a point out so you and I can have a conversation.
Okay.
You have to think of the environment. How organized is this on China's part? How organized is this from the globalista, these hidden hand people around the world who want to make hay, make a gazillion, and they see China as a partner in their plots and schemes to own and control the world and to create a worldwide slave state. From China's side, they see these Western operatives as being able to be bought and paid for by multiple different means, whether it's cash, or they're blackmailing, or it's honeypots, or pedophilia, and even worse. Whatever it is, they'll provide it, just provided that they get the influence and control that they want. And so you think of China, and it's like a James Bond movie. It's like a, Our Man Flynn movie or something. Is there a global plot and people are behind it? You can visualize that within China's war rooms, with these long-term plans. How do you take control of the world? What are the key places you have to do it? What industry, politics, weaponization, etc., do you need to control in order to take over the world? And I've mentioned it in the past, and I'll go into a lot of detail, but the wargaming that we were doing using teams augmented by computers back in the 70s and then into the early 80s that I was aware of before, I wasn't in those places anymore. The war games included not just nation states, but some of them, which seemed very playful at the time, were as though aliens landed on planet Earth. What if one alien landed and tried to take over the world, what would they do? What if 10 or 200, a very important number, landed and tried to take over the world? What would they do? How would they go about it? How long would it take them? Would we recognize it and be able to respond? And you had to think of, what are their capabilities, so that you had some zone of reality you were dealing with. And what technologies might they filter in, and how could that affect it? And so running these war games over and over and over and over and over, looking at different options and what could we do to fight back. In reality, some of those I think were precisely aimed at Russia and China, even though they were couched as being aliens from outer space. Russia was easier to beat. China is different. And you can visualize, I think everybody in this audience could visualize, that if you had a group with a military mindset, 20, 50, 100, and they start gaming out, how are you going to win the world? And what are the key hotspots? What do we got to do? Militarily, industry, technology, programming, all the way through it. And then you look at what's going on in the world, and especially something like AWeb. That is part of a very intricate, extensive, expansive operation to undermine governments around the world. Literally succeeding, if you want to go by where President Trump's coming from, in stealing the 2020 election in the United States. But let me go just a little bit further on that. So that presumes China's doing everything they're doing, and we're doing nothing. We have no response in play to try to counter this. No, bullshit. That's why there's not a lot of light that's given to the public on much of what's being done to counter this, because we haven't pulled the pin completely on what needs to be done to counter this global operation. But it's coming, and it's coming very quickly. The flip, the turn is about to occur. And that's why President Trump has called out China, named it very precisely as being at behind the scenes, very overtly doing these things. And then where is the front line? You have nation states attacking and responding, but they usually do it as much as possible, not on their own turf, to expose their own resources, citizenry, etc. So they do it at proxy locations. Where's the main hub on planet Earth of the election frauds and undermining of elections, capturing of elections all across the planet? It's right here in Seoul, South Korea. You are right now looking at the city that is at the front lines of election fraud on planet Earth, where the Chinese are working through to take over the world.
Fascinating. So yeah, AWeb, I've never heard that before, but that's that's going to become very common right now. It's being shared everywhere. Now you sent me a Substack, uh, uh, Canacola News, Mr. President, reopen Conic, the CCP election software case your intelligence agencies are still burying. So I was reading through that. It's pretty amazing
Yes.
that the guy that's in charge of that, that's in charge of almost every major city in the United States, is a Chinese guy with the CCP, trained in China, totally connected with the CCP. Wow. And running the software company, and manages the poll workers and poll chiefs and equipment and election day logistics. So and here it says Los Angeles, San Francisco, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and 24 of America's largest jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Let me just say it this way. Chewing a little ice there, apologize. let me say it this way. I don't think that we have seen even hardly the beginning of the real fight back that America is going to be involved in and that we have to do. President Trump laid down the gauntlet the other day, where we're going and why. The intervening period since 2020 has largely been about allowing the court cases to show that you can't get to justice in the Justice Department and through the Justice Department. You can't get to justice through the U.S. courts. They're too captured and they're also too slow. In this kind of a war, it's moving so quickly now that the court system, in its plodding way, is inadequate to the task. This isn't a policing matter. We've been attacked at the nation state level, and the people behind the attack aren't looking at this as tiddlywinks or checkers. This is chess to control the whole world, and there's no. Think of why would they care about Central Africa with the Congo if they're gaming out, taking over, and owning the world? Why do they care about that little place? Those people. They don't care about the people. The people are in the way. That's why you have 10 to 20 million people dead. And China didn't do it directly. They did it through proxies, brought in operatives from other places in the Mideast for a religious war to wipe out that local population so they could take over the mines. 10 million dead, 20 million dead, it's just a statistic. It doesn't even matter. But within this operation, in their war room, in order to win, they need all of those rare earth elements. They need the cobalt that uniquely comes from that area to have enough of the raw materials to build out their war machine and now their space machine. They've seen certain areas where they need access, ports, water, other materials, and even to control the finances for anybody that might oppose them in various places. So they've gamed this out, and they see America in a certain light. They've got to undermine and get control of America through the elections, and then the resources, and then the business. So they're flooding money in covertly through various means, and then buying and paying for elections. That's why there's within the campaign contributions. I sort of maybe touched on it when I did the show with you the other day. I don't know if I did or not precisely, but just within, well, even the day of President Trump's speech, in several locations, multi-agency task forces were brought together, and they're putting cases together on campaign finance on a urgent basis to be able to bring those cases within the grand jury system and start indictments. So for those that probably aren't listening, they don't listen to us, Michael. They should run and not walk. Get the best legal counsel they can, because they are in the sites. That if they've been involved in campaign finance with illicit entities, and if they've received money in their candidates, they may not be as invisible as they think at this point in time. So these things are maturing, but this intervening period, why wait? Why wait? Why wait? Because it took time, it's taken time, and it still will require some more time to bring the broader population up to speed on what's occurring and who's behind it. President Trump saying it's China, saying it publicly, not mincing any words, is important because it starts to focus our minds and our understanding of the type of a war that we're in, because it's about to get much more real, much broader, going into the digital stuff, and even the falsehoods that happened with Biden getting put in power. And it will help to the people to understand this context of a worldwide war, in the election area, as the basis for having to pause with the election here coming up, because the voter rolls haven't been cleaned up. You now have a number of candidates that have been moved through the primaries onto the general ballot for this fall election on November 3rd, and they are not there clean. And if you were to go forward with the election, you would just seal the deal on the election fraud. You'd have to, start over for another process. 2 years from now, we don't have that. Things are going very quickly around the world. But coming back to South Korea, think of World War II and the fight against Germany and the Nazis. Where did it all come to a head? We were fighting on the sea. We were fighting with bombing stuff. Battle of Britain early on, to stop Germany from just walking into England. And when the actual fight back occurred, there was lots of people that wanted us to land in Europe and start the war in the summer of 43. We had a lot of supplies in England, a lot of personnel there. But, we had just come off of this failed landing that was attempted and nearly killed out most of the British Army a year earlier. And so that was just not wise. We held till we had a real force. And so it was not till the following year, June of 44, when the tides, by the way, favored a massive landing. And but you didn't start in Germany. You started in France and then fought your way across Europe to Berlin. In this fight on the election stuff, the beachhead, I believe, that is going to have to be our main assault is right here in South Korea. It's the most important location for what's going on if you're going to cut off the influence into elections across the world. It's the pivot point for China out into the rest of the world, and you need to nip it in the bud. Now, South Korea is in a very precarious moment right now because a huge percentage of their politicians have been hijacked, captured, blackmailed, honeypotted to own this moment in South Korea. And the undermining of the South Korean government so extensive. Imagine, here's why I got a question for you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Think of one of the most hotly contested, most dangerous places on planet Earth that is just on a hair trigger at any moment to blow into some kind of a war. We're told this all over the world. Wouldn't that be the 38th parallel?
Good point. Yeah.
So think about this. If the South Korean people, they know how aggressive, assertive North Korea is, and wanting to somehow come over the border, supposedly cause any kind of a little trigger. Shoot, we've still got huge numbers of American forces here as a trigger. Do you know what the government officials here in South Korea decided to do? They decided, this is Chinese influence, by the way, they decided to take the bullets out of the guns of all of their South Korean troops at the border to North Korea. because they don't want to take a chance somebody might start something, right? But then that wasn't enough. So then they decided to take away the guns. And then they decided they didn't want people to have knives. They might hurt somebody. So they armed their forces at the 38th parallel with batons. They're now standing by waiting for North Korea to come through and do something with batons.
Yeah, it's that's very frustrating. I worked many years when I was in the SEAL teams with the Korean SEALs, and I came to love Korea. It was just, great place, great food, great people. We had them go through our training in the SEAL team, SEAL training. Uh, so yeah, it's just very frustrating to see that. They always thought the Korean SEALs that I work with that eventually the two sides will be combined. But that's not the way to go about it. You have to be strong. If you pure weak, then you're going to get taken over. So yeah, it sounds like a captured operation there. That's very frustrating.
Well, and then the other thing is the politicians here, think about the US when you do it. The politicians here have decided to allow, to cap the number of Chinese that can come in and get residency here in South Korea at 10 million a year. You have a country that has 50 million people,
Oh my God.
okay? And they're coming in. But even on the election stuff, here's what's already happening. Um, so, uh, June 3rd, their elections are so screwed up here in South Korea and getting worse. June 3rd, while they were looking at the ballots, or the voting, there was a number of places, mostly conservative locations, almost exclusively conservative voters live, where they ran out of ballots. And so the people couldn't vote. They went to the vote center and they did this little deal. People were aware that if they voted early, that their votes could be um, countered in the election software. And they had seen this from other elections, so they were screaming bloody murder. You got to be careful. So the meme went out, the word went out to all the conservatives: only vote on election day. Arizona, hello. Arizona, hello. Arizona. Only vote on election day. It'll screw them up. So when the people showed up at the election centers on election day, the paper didn't fit the tabulator stuff. The votes couldn't work. And then eventually, as people were complaining, there was no more ballots. And so huge lines of people were waiting to vote.
Mhm.
And you're only midday and there's no more ballots. So you should have voted uh, remotely by mail. You should have, uh, put it in the drop box, and you didn't do it. So too bad. Now you missed out. And the people were very upset. Eventually, they came out, said they were voting, or they were closing the voting uh, centers where this was happening. But one of them was at the Olympic Park, where the Olympics were held in South Korea years ago. And so at that vote center, which was in a stadium, where a bunch of stuff had been brought to, the people were so upset they hadn't got a chance to vote that they started blocking the doors. One woman initially, and then a couple of guys, and it just kept spreading. And they blocked all the doors. There's 8 entrances to this building. And then there was the people that hadn't been allowed to vote. Other people started showing up spontaneously. And the point was they wanted to take these votes to the National Election Center, so it's a central vote counting place, kind of like Nevada. You bring all the votes into one place and then don't let anybody see what's going on, and supposedly have a clean count. They didn't want these votes to leave because they knew that once the votes went to the vote counting center, they would, not get a true count. And they'd already supposedly counted them. They were in a transportation process, but the count didn't sound right, didn't hit the numbers right. So people blocked off these ballots inside the building. There's about 2.3 million ballots there right now. That started on June 3rd of this year. At the peak, there was 100,000 people there day after day, morning and night, protesting. They didn't want these ballots carted off because if they counted them, they wouldn't count them lawfully, accurately. The numbers have dropped down to where there's an average of 3,000 to 5,000 people there 24 hours a day. Sometimes in the mornings it might come down to 1,000. But one thing that hasn't changed the entire time without stopping, 24 hours a day since June 3rd, the chant, and it's loud out amongst the crowd, is hand count, paper ballot, counted where cast, stop election fraud. And there's no group organizing it. There's nobody in charge, because if there was, the police could cancel their permit. But by law, this is the people's area. So there's nobody organizing it. People just spontaneously show up. You've got some churches that have services there 24 hours a day, praying. And gospel singers there. You have various of the election parties that are there. The PPP party is the conservative, kind of like the Republicans here in the States. And the Democrat Party is called the Democrat Party here, which has totally been bought and paid for by China. But the protests have stayed going, and they're so intense. The police can't really come in here and stop it because there's so many people paying attention. The world's watching. So think of Tiananmen Square. They would like to stop it. They'd like to be very harsh. When my friend, former Prime Minister Wang, came there, he tried to go in where the ballots were and to make sure that they were secured till the people could get to them. The police that blocked him and stopped him, people were noting, and even people in the police here in South Korea said, wait a minute, these are not officers that we recognize. Turns out you have a bunch of Chinese people that have been placed in positions within these groups doing the policing. And they were a bit more harsh in dealing with stuff. People are now watching for that, so they're having to be very careful about where they put these Chinese military in, as though they're police officers here locally. But that's what's going on. And but the protests continue. What they want is for the ballots to be opened in public with all the observers there. And what they also believe that they'll find is that a significant number of the ballots will be on ballot paper that clearly is not the official paper here. And because they've already found some in various places, it'll be a large number. In fact, here's another aside. Around the country, when the people realized a lot of these ballots were fraudulent, that they were made on the wrong paper, election officials took the ballots and they took them to locations where they could burn them and openly burned them. So people complained about all the smoke from the burning ballots around the country. But in this location, they didn't get to it. Another location, because the people made such a stink about the smoke and the stench and, that the ballots are being burned, they took 7.5 tons of these fraudulent ballots, so nobody could get them to look at them forensically. And they dissolved them in chemicals so that they couldn't be looked at. And then they would be utterly less than ash. Because even what they were doing, some of them, they were shredding these ballots. The citizens came back and went through meticulously like a movie and sorted out the ballots and showed how the ballots were fraudulent and then the votes were fraudulent like that. So they're in a hell of a fight here in South Korea.
Sounds like America.
Yeah, it is. It's even worse.
People
in some
there
ways.
standing up. they're moving on it. So that's what we need to see in America. That's good.
Well, they're in a precarious situation. The one thing
Yeah.
that I will say is that the amount of American flags there at the Olympic Village and Stadium was probably on par with the number of South Korean flags.
Wow.
And because they see their fate tied to what happens in America, if America doesn't make it through this with what President Trump is doing, they
Right.
don't survive. And here's
Yeah.
the other thing: you have 50 million people here, with now the politicians that are on the payoffs and under control by China deciding that they're going to allow up to 10 million Chinese a year to come in here. Here's one of the other things that was going on. They had people here that started going door to door looking at the voter rolls and checking to see if the people that are on the voter rolls actually lived where they said they live. And over and over and over, tens of thousands of voters have now been outed. They are Chinese ghost voters. And so you knock on the door, ask people, is so and so here? Does so and so live here? And they say, no, I've never heard of that name before. No, they don't live here. They're not a residence of our, somebody living in our house, apartments with 10 people living at them that have one bedroom. Well, they're Chinese ghost voters. Where have you heard that kind of crap before? And they're real Chinese registered to vote in Korea as though they live here at addresses that, are just hijacked from local residents, and they're real addresses. But until you go through the voter rolls, so their voter rolls have to be cleaned up, just as we have in America. But the South Koreans view this as beyond just a political thing. One of the things, of course, about China being communist is anti religion. And the church here in South Korea realizes that in many ways, this is about destroying the church in South Korea. And for example, since COVID, 10,000 churches were closed here in South Korea because people couldn't go, they couldn't participate. And then they've called in, they have local laws here about how you go about doing any money movement within a church. And so the congregations were becoming even afraid to let known who they were within some of the churches. The pastors, if you don't have the agreement of the church, if you only have the church council leadership and the pastor decide, let's say we have to sell off a piece of property, they have to have the vote of the church members. Well, the church members weren't participating and they had to make decisions quickly. So they went ahead and sold it. Well, now they get in trouble for money laundering, even though you can see everywhere the money went. It's just a way of attacking anybody that's tied religiously to, a specific body and getting bogged down in the government red tape. So people have, been under attack. Are you staying or are you leaving? The church that we attended today is a member of kind of an association of churches, a number of churches. They pray 24/7, and they maintain it within their various locations. This specific group was in a building that they were leasing space here until just a little over a year ago. And then they had this thing, they were going to have to move to a new location. They were growing, a lot of young people there. And so they made plans and there's various reasons why they were having go at the pace they were, to move to this new location. Then pressure came on for them being at the location they were in. They had kind of a basement meeting area that they did all their prayer 24/7. They would lease offices in an upper area of the building for Sunday services and like that. But they got tremendous pressure and had to move. And so they moved to their new location and months earlier than they'd planned on. Well, just a few days after they completed leaving the place that they were at, there was a heavy heavy rain and then apparently some mud flow or something that caused a surge of water into that specific building, and it flooded the basement in just a matter of a couple of minutes. And it also, all of the electrical for that whole building runs through that exact area. So it was understood, had they been doing their 24-hour prayer, where they would probably had 2 to 3 dozen people present at that time of the middle of the night, those people would have been killed, uh,
Wow.
either drowned or electrocuted, before they could get out of the building, because it was such a rapid thing. So they see the hand of God protecting them. They see this as a religious fight as much as anything. And then, by the way, in a couple of the areas that are especially held by the Chinese, the art in the area, and even government paid for art, is very bizarre. It's like the art at the Denver airport. It's like the art on the Podesta stuff that WikiLeaks leaked, put out several years ago. Very bizarre, very occult. And we see that also within the election arena. Eric Coomer from the Dominion stuff here in the States, with his tattoo of a screaming pope, a pope being tortured in a cage. And we see similar artwork over here in Korea and other places that AWeb people are working from. So there's an understanding that this is a spiritual war as much as it is just for elections. So there's a lot more that I'll probably have to, save for other days. Let's get the conversation started as we did. But I wanted to kind of give you that feel of what's happening and make sure that we start the process now of moving AWeb to the top of our target list, with what the president's doing, what we're looking at, all of those affiliations, all of those members and participants, and the ties to people involved in our own intelligence agencies, USAID, and Homeland Security. What did you know? When did you know it? Why weren't you reporting it? Who was paying you off? What did they pay you with?
Yeah, a lot of people going to be involved in that one, I'm sure. Now I agree with you. I've been agreeing with you for quite some time. I think you maybe brought it out before everybody else, that this is going to get pushed. The midterm will get pushed. I agree with you. I think it should be a year out so that we can re-vote in the primaries, vote some quality people in, and not having that vote compromised as well. There's a lot of compromised people out there, like you're talking about, that are in position to, get inserted in power, going to keep this monkey show going, corruption and so forth.
Well,
So,
and we have so many friends in common. Look at the California situation that we all know about. I don't know if a year is going to be enough time. I think it might be maybe a year and a half or something,
oh wow,
you
push
know,
the day more. Wow,
but
yeah,
I mean, because the complexity here, the extensive, how are you going to root this all out? So I think the reason I wanted to just
boy.
pull you back for a second is it'd be great if we could do it in a year. But when you look at all the technical logistics, um, you got one chance to sort this out for real. You got to get real. Whatever it takes, that's what it takes. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, good point.
So,
And, there's other things that are going on. You've talked about this as well for quite some time. The possibility of some kind of nuclear event in the United States. Have been doing some nuke sifting for years now, trying to root those out. I thought directed energy weapon attacks were over, and now we're seeing them again in the United States on a horrific level, up in
yep,
Spokane,
yep,
California now. So. I mean, we're at war. It's a lot of people say, well, we're not a kinetic war. It's all like internet and the politics and voting. No, we're literally getting our cities burned out from under us, and most of these cities, well, almost all of them, are conservative areas. Just like you talked about earlier, the Maricopa County in Arizona, totally conservative area, and they targeted that area to take it down in the voting process in Arizona.
yep. And there's more. I'll talk about that here shortly too. That again, the money laundering, Maricopa and Sedona, Arizona, and then Silicon Valley, key places where, by the way, it's Chinese operatives
Yeah.
flowing that money out to campaigns across the country
Mhm.
to flip other locations. So campaign finance is going to be a huge part of what's coming here that we have to discuss. But trying to keep it in bite-sized pieces. The reality is, if we don't, my opinion, if we were not going to pause the election this fall, then you would have blown past a critical checkpoint, after which there's nothing but the cliff and no time to stop before the cliff. And I believe that that's why you're going to see something stunning and amazing. But it's not just to save America. The rest of the fight goes across the world.
Yeah.
And one of the places that is absolutely essential in this fight, perhaps the single most critical location on the planet in the election fraud fight and the fight back directly, precisely, exactly against China, is right here in South Korea. And prayer required, but also the U.S. to dive in. We as people are so closely aligned. And you mentioned earlier Japan with the yen. That's why President Trump said, no, we're going to step in and support the yen. Secretary Bessent did just that. Because if you let it go into free fall, it takes down the U.S. economy with it. So we're in a precarious position. And right across the way is South Korea. Japan, South Korea, very uh, front lines in a couple different ways. Japan more so on the economic side, South Korea on the election integrity side out to the world. Both of them places that China is waging war, and the American people may not fully have appreciated that yet, but you will more.
All right. Looks like unfortunately we lost Juan. We'll maintain a little bit more. Hopefully, we'll come back in. So normally we talk about, he's um, involved in quite a few things. Obviously, he has and he's part of an intelligence group, or the head of an intelligence group. I would say that is gathering incredible amounts of information that's really majorly impactful for not only the United States but the world as a whole. So the Storm Summit is an event that's coming up in 32 days, September 10th through the 13th. Uh, I'll have in the description box the information on that. Here's what it looks like, and it's going to be at the Ahern Hotel, Las Vegas. There's the address. Tomorrow, the ticket price goes up, starting August 10th, $700. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, this will be the last day. You get it for 600. And then there's hotels within the area where you can walk. I don't know if there's walking. The Ahern Hotel, the Sahara Hotel is within walking distance. Trump Hotel is very nice. Been there several times. And then we got the Stratosphere, which is right next to the Area 2. A little bit, not quite a long walk, but you could actually walk from there as well. So very, very, full, list of people that are coming to speak, even more so than last time. The information that gets shared at these events basically goes all the way to the top to President Trump. He gets alerted to some of the things that are shared in this particular event. So you want to be there, you want to be on the cutting edge of that. So looks like Juan, he's out there in South Korea, doing obviously some good work. That's the head of where the election fraud is, as he's saying. AWeb is something that we need to be aware of and start to look at that as far as like corruption. And taking down this corrupt system is going to be very, very challenging. It's I think it's 11:30 his time, 10:30 my time. I'm getting ready to check out of a hotel and get on a flight. So it's interesting because I was working out at the gym this morning and I was looking at all the stuff on China, the election fraud that's being exposed. And I'm like, I'm gonna get on a show and blow that up. And then Juan, out of the blue, hits me up and says, "Hey, this Chinese election fraud is out of control." And I said, "Yeah, I was going to do a show on that." He says, "It's early where you are because it would have been early back in Pacific Standard Time." So I was like, "No, I just got done with the gym, got cleaned up. I'm ready to do a show now." And he's like, "Well, let's do it." So there you go, guys. We jumped on, did this show. Great insight on election fraud is being exposed. I feel very strongly that there's going to be a delay in the election because election fraud is being exposed, and the amount of election fraud that we're seeing right now, not just in the U.S. but across the world, is stunning. So we're going to have to clean it up. And I was thinking, well, another year. It's like some people. I think when Juan first came out, and started talking about it, we might be pushed to the spring, and it's like no, all of the election, pre-election stuff that we've already had, midterm election, is just out of control. I mean, I mean, the one that I think is the most egregious is Abbott won by like 92% or something crazy. That guy should not even be in office at this point. So you'll have continued problems in Texas where they're flooding Texas with Muslims. That's ground zero. Radical Muslims, Sharia law. At least they're coming in with mandates to no Sharia law. But that, I mean, we look at Michigan. Michigan just had illegal voting as well on a massive scale. That's being exposed. And, you know, it just had 45,000 Muslims marching in Michigan, in Detroit, and they were screaming "Death to America." So not a good time right now. I think there's needs to be a lot of deportation that goes on. Uh, People that are voting in Michigan that are here illegally and should have been deported. I mean, criminal records, felonies, sexual assault against children on their records. They're still here voting. All right, so and that was exposed just recently. So this is something we're going to have to take care of, and we're going to do it. One way or the other. There's more to come. All right, guys. Lots of love. Stay in